Good everyone, welcome to this video. Today we have a review on the IAR-81C. This is the last premium I have to review for a while, because obviously the sale hasn't dropped yet as I record this video. But obviously once the sale comes out, I'll have a lot more to review, let's put it that way. So the IAR-81C is a bit of an unusual plane. This is one of the few Romanian planes, and I think it's the only real domestically produced Romanian plane we actually have in the game. And whilst it's certainly not the greatest, I have to give it credit. It has its character. So the IAR-81C is a rank 2 battle rating 2.7 aircraft, and I believe, I may be wrong about this, it's only sold for about 1,000 Golden Eagles. Do I think it's worth the price of 1,000 GE? Personally, no. Now, why is that? Well, for 300 GE more, you can acquire yourself a pacifier, which I would argue is a lot more player friendly. But if you wait for a sale, this thing is a steal at half price for 500 Golden Eagles. Now, I know some people are going to jump in the comments and say, hold on a minute, Joe, this thing compresses like a bitch. And yeah, you're right. It does compress. Now, it's not as bad as it used to be, but if you are going to buy this aircraft, please do be aware that the flight model does tend to be a bit swapped around. Now, because it's cheap and you'll likely use it in tank forces anyway, because that's where I had the best service of it, it shouldn't be too much of a huge deal to you. However, if you're an ARB pilot, that might be a non-sale for you. Let's put it that way. Now, of course, there's plenty. Well, there's plenty of other vehicles you can choose in the Italian tech tree as a premium, which would do the job of this aircraft in ARB much better, which I would personally suggest that. But this thing has a good selling point of its ammo endurance, because the FN Browning machine guns have quite a lot of. Well, they can stay in the fight a long time, and the MG151s are pretty strong as well. If you run stealth rounds, I'll explain why in a minute. And the ordnance options of this aircraft are actually really good. So, well, for a fighter at least. So, going into the engine, we have a IAR IAR-14 K14 or K4C32. That is a long bloody ass name, isn't it? 14-cylinder radial, producing at most 959 horsepower. And if you're not wepping, which this thing does overheat a bit, 880 horsepower. Compared to the majority of aircraft at your BR, this is relatively weak, and subsequently, you're not going to get very good performance out of this aircraft. But that's not what it's about. This thing hits hard, and with its ordnance options, you can derp pretty well with this aircraft, especially given the ammo endurance of the 792s, and even the 151s pulling their weight against the more up armored targets. So, before I continue, let's go into the armor protection of this aircraft, which this thing is relatively tanky. I've got to give it that. So we have a 12.7mm plate just above the pilot's head, which is pretty handy. However, he has no backrest armor, which is a big flaw. But even then, the internals of the tail seem to take the bullets rather well. However, 50 cal will slice through this regardless, so just be aware of that. And the frontal bulletproof glass is similar to the Ducks actually, at 75mm thick. Now, if I remember rightly, bulletproof glass has I think it's a 0.45 modifier. So realistically, it's only about 34mm of effective protection. But even so, it's still very good for what it is, and you're rarely going to get pilot sniped in a head-on if you don't avoid. Chances are your engine's going to eat the shot, and you're probably dead from that point. So, let's get into the ordnance options. So, modifications. We have a couple of, shall we say, ones that I would use, and then we have one for if you don't like rockets. So, my actual recommended ammo loadout for this aircraft is double stealth. Now, obviously, I had it set to air because I forgot to change it, but double stealth I have actually had very good results with. before obviously I took it out again to get this footage because I had air targets loaded. But you get my point. The stealth rounds on the 20 mils appear to spark less for me, and the 7.92s are very good with stealth. They have 2 AI bullets, being adjustment incendiary, and 3 AP bullets. These are very good bullets, and obviously the 20 mil has 3 HEI, 1 APHE, and 1 API. So they serve well against the more up armored ground targets if needed. Let's go into the ordnance options. So, starting out, we have 2 50-kilogram bombs, 2, I think that they're pronounced Wolf Granata, but you will have to correct me on that because I don't have a clue. These rockets are very good, let's put it that way. A single 250-kilogram bomb, which is on a mechanism, which I will point out in a second. 2 50-kilogram bombs, this is for if you don't like rockets, and the 250 as I mentioned in the bomb mechanism. You then have the 2 Wolf Granata or whatever it is, rockets, and then you have the 2 50-kilogram bomb. This is the one I tended to use the most, and this is the one that I'm going to favorite just for this video, because it's just easier so I don't have to find the default and stuff. But this ordnance loadout is actually relatively good for a 2.7 fighter. The Wolf Granata rockets, if they hit their target, even if they miss some of the lighter targets, will insta-kill pretty much anything at their tier. Even somewhere up in the higher tiers, these rockets can work. And the 250-kilogram bomb has about a half a second to a 1 second release delay. That's important, so that's going to take some getting used to. But even if you're not using this thing in ground forces and you're wanting to use it in air RB, this thing's a very good support fighter. It can support its team well with its firepower, whilst the performance is lacking and the climb rate is lacking. Its durability for a single engine fire is actually rather incredible, and I really do have to admit, when I first got this thing I didn't like it, but now I actually quite do like it. But as mentioned though, this thing's flight model is changing pretty much every couple of months, so if there is any, well, if people who are new to the channel and watch this video in the future, if this vehicle does have compression issues later down the line, please do put a comment and I will put a pinned comment accordingly and delete that pinned comment if the compression issues, shall we say, disappear. So, let's get into the battle. And let's have a look at what the IAR-81C can do. So I was out with Munchkin to actually gather this footage, as you may remember from the scumbag alert, which happened a couple of weeks ago. Oh, that was funny, honestly. Funny enough, it was on this map as well, and one of the guys on the enemy team is actually one of the guys who was on the enemy team during that scumbag alert. But, yeah, well. Just as some people are, unfortunately. So this is a relatively short battle, and I don't contribute a huge amount to this battle, but that's not the point. Whilst we do get a few kills, being 3, the whole point of this aircraft is to support your team. This is a very good support fighter. One other point of note, if you don't like landing gear that takes more than 40 seconds, this thing takes like 45 seconds to bring its gear up. So if you like watching landing gear take less than 5 seconds so you've got most amount of performance, this aircraft isn't for you straight off the bat. But we spend the first couple of minutes climbing to altitude, and, well, Munchkin's in his BF-109E3, he wanted to lend me a hand as, well, actually I tell a lie, he actually wanted to help people spade, or do anything that they wanted to do, and I thought, yeah, I'll join you, Munchkin. That's obviously when we met the scumbag, and, yeah, you get the idea. So the duck on our team, Maki MC72, is actually going to go a bit ham. As you'll notice, he actually got 3 kills. Well, it shows 2 here, the third one's right there. And there it goes. I have to give credit to this guy, he made Mr. Quacker's work. Munchkin at this point gets bounced by a YP38, and I said to him, well, this is a pretty easy fight for either of us. the YP-38 is just a P-38E with a fancy name and worse armament. Munchkin manages to crit the left-hand engine of the YP, and Munchkin's out of airspeed at this point, so he's got to drop his nose a little bit. It's at this point where I thought, do you need some 151 help? And I was actually rather surprised I pulled the shot off that I did. I lead just in front of the YP, I fire a burst, and snap it like a twig. Kill number 1. That was a .65 mile shot, so that was pretty impressive to pull off, and Munchkin was even surprised at that one. So at this point, it's down to 3 enemy planes, because this was a relatively short battle in terms of player numbers. We have the Mustang Mark 1A, we have this Spitfire over here, and we have a Leo, which is currently bombing our bases at the moment. So I said to Munchkin, right, you make your way over to the Mustang, I will try and see if I can take the Spitfire. Now, in fairness, Munchkin does very well to support me in this battle. He realised that I couldn't take the Spitfire or outrun it, because the IAR is incredibly slow for its BR. And the Spitfire pilot knew what he was doing. So I said to Munchkin, after trying to follow the Spitfire briefly, I said to him, right, I'm just going to extend, I'm going to need you to come and back me up. Munchkin immediately breaks off the Mustang and makes his way towards me, which, hats off to you, man. Like, even though I'm only outrunning him a bit, he's actually going to start catching me very shortly, and that's when Munchkin's actually going to arrive and help me bitch slap him. So at the moment, I'm starting to pull away from the Spitfire, but as you'll notice, he's starting to gain an advantage now. I'm losing speed, he's gaining it, he is catching up. 0.58 of a mile and he is closing. He fires a brief burst and the tanky airframe doesn't care. Because it's 303, well, let's annoy the ones who love ammunition names and stuff like that. 7.7s aren't really going to do a lot to an IAR unless they're concentrated fire. And that's really what sets this thing apart. The Spitfire makes a fatal mistake of trying to go head on. I blow a wingtip off after he damages my oil. And I bitch slap him for kill number 2. So thank you to Munchkin for helping me out there. I probably would have been dead. Let's put it that way. So at this point, it's down to the Leo that I mentioned earlier, which has managed to bomb out 2 bases, and is also down to the Mustang Mark 1A, which flight's probably not going to be here because it's the IAR, but don't forget to tuck your flaps in whenever you fly that thing. Anyway, common squad mate jokes aside, let's push forward in the battle a bit. So the Mustang Mark 1A is actually going to take off in a moment, and he's actually going to try and fight. Now the AAR is good when it is above an opponent. It's when it's below an opponent is where it struggles, because it doesn't have the horsepower, it doesn't have the energy retention, and it doesn't really have the turn rate either. So the Mustang decides to pull up into me, which to be honest is probably one of the smarter moves, because I didn't have a very good shot at him. And he makes the mistake of pulling it proper into the vertical, but I baited him for the 190, who ends up getting a good smack in. He damages the P50, or I'm just going to call it P51 because I can't be bothered. It is basically it is a P51, so I don't care. But he damages the oil of the Mustang. The Mustang attempts to run towards his airfield, because Mustangs do. But he's at least trying to dodge me, and that's where I get a critical hit, blowing his entire tail section off. For my 3rd and final kill. To be brutally honest, there wasn't a lot he could have done there, so he kind of did what he tried to do, but even so. So, at this point, it's just down to me to ground pound, because Munchkin's now chasing down the Leo, the rest of us are over here, so there's not really anything for us to do. Munchkin's going to kill him in the next couple of minutes, so it's just down to me to farm. Of course, this thing with its 792s can only realistically kill the artillery and sometimes the light pillboxes, depending on what belts you use. Stealth can do it, but I didn't want to waste the huge amount of ammo for it. But at this point, all I do is ground pound for the next 2 minutes. But anyway, I think this thing's a good buy at 500 Golden Eagles. Obviously, if you get it half price, don't buy it at full price. It's not worth that. If you're going to try and buy this thing at full price, just get yourself 300 more Golden Eagles and get yourself an Italian Spitfire. That will be a lot more forgiving and at least a lot more, shall we say, you'll learn it quicker than you will learn this thing. And obviously, if this aircraft receives a nerf in the future, that will obviously create a whole different issue. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys off. I hope you enjoyed today's review on the IAR-81C, and I will catch you all on the next one.